Today I want to discuss something a bit more personal than usual. This blog is devoted to explanations and defenses of the Catholic faith, but I have to recognize that as intellectually sound as these arguments might be, or at least hopefully they are, convincing and converting people is never so straightforward. Ask a person why he or she is Catholic, and you almost never get a list of good arguments. The Catholic faith is true, good, and beautiful, but we aren't computers. Those qualities are never considered in the abstract. In individuals, these traits are discovered in experiences which drive the matter down into bedrock of our personalities, and these cannot be manufactured even with the most powerful syllogisms. My family has a poor track record when it comes to remaining Catholic. This was especially true in high school and in college. Why did I remain Catholic when no one else did? Today I wanted to share my 3 experiences of what kept me moored in the Catholic faith. Here's the first one. Back in early high school, I went to a Sunday night youth ministry thing at the local parish. It was well-intentioned, but mostly ineffective. I really couldn't tell you a single thing that I learned about the Catholic faith during that time period. But one night, the head youth minister lady told us a story about her uncle. He had been divorced and had taken up in a second pseudo-marriage outside the church, and that, to put it in a somewhat jaded secular term, places one in a sort of second-class citizenship within the Catholic Church. For instance, you can't receive communion or become a godparent, and you might be excluded from other ministries also. Well, this uncle was approached by certain non-Catholics and asked, "Why do you stay in that church that treats you so poorly? Why not go someplace else where they'll at least let you receive communion?" And his reply is something that I'll never forget. He said, "I'd rather be 10% Catholic than 100% anything else." You see, all my life I've been told that the Catholic faith was sort of an optional form of Christianity, one with a lot of rules and rituals and extra stuff. But at rock bottom, there was nothing unique or important about it, and maybe even it was a lesser form of Christianity. But that quote, it was the first time the Catholic faith had been presented to me as something so surpassingly valuable that it was even worth doing poorly. The second instance took place during my tenure as a Target cashier. There was a woman who came through my lane with tons of items and a very loud crying baby. And the sound was ear-piercing and continued from the moment she entered the lane to the time she exited the building. And being the youngest in my family, I had never been exposed to babies in any meaningful way. I was just completely unfamiliar with kids. So the prolonged exposure to the deafening cry of this child just left me a bit out of sorts. It was exhausting. Well, the next person in line was this little old woman, and she saw how shaken up I was, and she said to me, "You've never been around screaming babies before, have you?" And I replied, "No, ma'am, I have not." And then she smiled and said 7 words, which I'll likewise never forget. She said, "It's the music of angels, you know." There was so much wrapped up in that statement. There was the intense, unconditional love of babies, the mention of angels, the idea that there was something beautiful hidden behind that which is objectively painful. It was the convergence of thoughts which I knew could only come from one source, and I reflexively blurted out, "You're Catholic." And she was. So how does that keep me Catholic? Well, I was barely a mediocre Catholic at the time, and perhaps that hasn't changed. Still, there was something in me which recognized the beauty and the source of that old lady's statement. It was like a secret language, one which formed the key to a vault of otherworldly wisdom. I knew that if I ever left the Catholic faith, I'd be walking away from that language and that wisdom forever. I would never hear that language again. Here's the last one. Back in high school, I began noticing this annual event in which people would come to school with black smudges on their forehead. I had no idea it was a Catholic thing. So when I finally got involved with the Catholic community in my junior year, I wound up attending my first ever Ash Wednesday morning service, and thus I became one of those weirdos with the smudges on their heads. That day I was conscious of getting odd looks, but that was to be expected. The previous year I had been among those who was giving the odd looks, so it didn't really matter to me. No, what really stuck in my mind was this moment entering chemistry class, and some guy was exiting the room from the previous period, and I have no idea who he was. But he had a smudge on his head too. And he looked at me, a perfect stranger, and gave me the guy nod. You hopefully know what I'm talking about. Now, I had always wanted to have a brother. It was something I lacked growing up. It always felt like a hole in my formation as a man. But here, outside this chemistry class, with this guy I'd never met, there was a recognition that we were members of the same family. This bizarre Catholic ritual had turned a perfect stranger into a brother. It was a transubstantiation as mysterious and profound as the Eucharist. One of the few things I had been taught about the faith was that it makes us brothers and sisters. And I had accepted this idea notionally, but this was the first time I really understood and made it part of me that being part of the Catholic faith was part of being a family, and I had more brothers and sisters than I had ever imagined. So those are my 3 experiences. Those were the 3 hooks that the Holy Spirit stuck in me and made it so even all throughout college when I was really not a very good Catholic at all, I still never really seriously considered leaving the faith. Again, the arguments for the faith are important, but they always need a setting. So those experiences are the pylons around which the good arguments are poured like so much concrete. My role as a youth minister is to hopefully facilitate some of those experiences in the students, or failing that, to help the kids understand those experiences when they have them elsewhere. Because if there's nothing else I've learned over the years, watching kids stay, watching kids leave, it's that all the concrete, or rather all the arguments in the world, can get washed into a sea of doubt unless there's experiences that truly hit the bedrock of our personality. So I appreciate you guys for listening to this, and hopefully you've gained something from it. Take care.